Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Bandits show. We're here for when things get interesting on the QB list. But I suppose let's talk about what the big news of the week was. Obviously, the Patriots have signed Cam Newton. My thoughts being it'll add 2 wins onto the season. I think he'll win him a couple of extra games, but I don't think his play style isn't designed for New England.
So they got to overtake the Jets now then in your rankings, or
yeah, they'll probably move up from last, I think.
Do I still get half a win if he wins Comeback Player of the Year? Do we still have to big that up if he wins it?
Yeah, if they go and win the Super Bowl with him, then yeah.
No, I didn't say
win the Super Bowl would get half a point.
And win Comeback Player of the Year. But, so the stipulation is we have to win it all.
Yeah.
Not confident anymore, lads.
But I don't know. I suppose I like it in the sense of they've got 2 options rather than just Jared Stidham.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for Cam because it is outrageous that it took him so long to get on a team, and what Carolina did holding on to him throughout like the early parts of free agency and then cutting him after it all was pretty harsh. Like considering what he's done for the team. I don't know. Only time will tell. He's had basically a year out because he played a couple of games. I know he played the Rams in the opener, but I don't remember him playing more than sort of like 3
I think he got injured very early.
Yeah, so he's had basically a full year off, and then obviously, but like we say, it all just depends if he can integrate into the system and how they change it. Because he's not even close to what Tom Brady is.
No.
So they'll have to change things up.
Belichick's always said though that he wants a mobile quarterback. So he's got one now. He's got one of the best ones ever. He's a bit different though. He's not like a mobile quarterback in the sense that he's going to like run around, juke people. He's like more of like a power runner, isn't he? So
yeah, he is like a different mobile. He is mobile, but not like your Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, who's like escaping people all the time and then moving around the pocket. He's like he just sort of holds onto the ball sometimes and just puts his shoulder in.
I think it's more of like an aspect of they're getting Cam so they can trade Cam off at the end of the season. He'll play the full year.
Yeah.
But they'll trade him off for a couple extra draft picks and then...
Is he signed a 1-year deal?
Yeah, 1 year, mostly incentive.
Yeah, so he'll probably sign a deal. It's one of them for the Patriots. It's like you're saying, he's either good and they decide to re-sign him, or he's all right and someone takes a punt on him and offers him a deal and they get that 3rd round, or maybe someone trades for him, who knows.
Yeah.
Depends on Jared Stidham.
But I think it's because they're going to go into next year's draft. They're going to offer, say, 2nd place or 3rd place in the draft 7 to 8 picks for the 2nd overall pick. And
do you think they'll attack QB that hard?
I think they'll get Justin Fields. I think Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 overall no matter what. So,
I mean, obviously there's a lot of football to be played or not to be played, depending on what happens with college football between now and then. But yeah, I mean, they obviously need a quarterback. I'd be very surprised if Jared Stidham's the future in New England.
That's obviously the big news, and let's get on to what everyone's watching for, which will be
why they're tuning in.
The list.
Give the people what they want.
Yeah.
We've got obviously up on the screen what's already been revealed, 40 to 21. But to start on Luke's side.
Yeah, I get to kick things off this week.
We've got 20 to 16, so...
I've just looked across at Chris's to see that I've got Teddy Bridgewater 9 spots higher, so clearly I'm a lot higher on Teddy Bridgewater. But yeah, I quite like Teddy Bridgewater. I said it last week a couple of times. I do think he'd probably still be the starter in Minnesota if he hadn't had that horrific injury. And he's a bit of a sort of check down Charlie, and he's a bit of a protect the ball, move the ball. He's not a gunslinger. He's not going to sort of wow you with his throws, but he does the job. And potentially in Carolina with McCaffrey, and I feel like they've got a couple of good receivers, DJ Moore and blanking on the other guy. This Curtis Samuel, he's a bit of a sort of scat back type guy. And then obviously McCaffrey's like a wide receiver / running back. If he can put up 2,000 yards next year, and Bridgewater can protect the ball, it could be a decent team. I know some people have sort of got them going like 2-14, but I don't really see it. I think they've got 2 good players.
I think they're better than people let on.
I think they'll have I don't get me wrong, I don't think they're going to go to the playoffs because I think they've got a really tough division. I think the NFC South is one of the tougher ones in the NFL at the minute. Not that I'm sold on the whole Brady thing, but he is going to make the Bucs better, I think, to a certain extent. Obviously, the Saints are still going to be there, and I think the Falcons have got a good team. They've got a lot of good players, so I just feel like it's only time will tell when they sort of pick it back up again. And then at 19, I've got Kyler Murray. I was impressed with him last year. Not as a Rams fan, I'm pretty annoyed he's an Arizona Cardinal. I think he should have kept Josh Rosen. But he looked really good last year. Number 1 overall pick, and he just looked like an NFL quarterback from the start. He didn't look out of place, and I think next year we could be looking at a QB. He could potentially be a top 5 quarterback. I do really rate him highly. He's like your Lamar Jackson, your Russell Wilson. He is like an unbelievable quarterback, or he's on that sort of path. I don't think there's much more you can say. I mean, people maybe say I've got him a bit low, but having only seen 1 year of him, it's hard to sort of judge. But I do think he'll be definitely, if we did this next year, he'd be definitely locked for the top 10.
Yeah, I like Kyler Murray. I feel like he's definitely got more potential than people sort of see. But how many people actually watched Arizona play a lot last year?
Yeah.
I think the addition with DeAndre Hopkins will massively improve that offense.
We've got a number 1 receiver. Larry's not like that number 1 receiver. He's a great option to have, but he's getting on in age, and having him and Larry is only going to make him better.
Yeah, the problem was just fixing that whole line, and then they sorted.
Yeah. But he's your type of Russell Wilson QB who can just escape and move around in the pocket, and he has got a big arm as well. And it's strange, isn't it, that the sort of last 2 great quarterbacks, or look like they're going to be great quarterbacks that come out of the draft, have both seemed to come from this baseball background. Mahomes and obviously Murray, and even going as far back as Russell Wilson. There was talk of him at the time going into baseball, so maybe that's the type of guys you need. And then at 18, I've got Baker. He had a down year last year. I don't think he was great, but I think that was partly due to the expectations on the Browns. I think they had high expectations with obviously Odell and Jarvis, Myles Garrett. They had a lot of big players, and like we spoke about it in previous episodes about, they didn't quite reach that, and I think that showed. I think there was a lot of pressure on Baker. Obviously, it didn't work with Freddie Kitchens, but I'm not out on Baker. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, and I do think he'll always level out around this number. But this is, like we've said in previous weeks, this is an important year for him, and he needs to step up and sort of put the O on his back a little bit and be the sort of leader of that team. He is a little bit immature, and he still has that sort of chip on his shoulder, and he still is a bit too active on Twitter, and he sort of gets involved with people that, in my opinion, I wouldn't like it if I was a fan. Like, I'd rather me quarterback just go about his business, watch film, play football, and do what he's doing. But that's not what Baker's like.
Yeah, he does have a maturity issue, I think.
Yeah.
But obviously that was his first 2 seasons. He's lasted longer than Johnny Manziel did, so...
Yeah. Well, he's a better footballer than Johnny Manziel.
It could have gone worse. I think I like him if he has everything around him. He can probably put on the same performance as Case Keenum did in Minnesota, but he does need everything to sort of be perfect to get there.
They do look like they're going to have a very good O next year as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, they took Wirfs. They signed an O-lineman who I can't think who it was now off the top of my head. Obviously, they've got Chubb and Hunt in the backfield. Obviously, Odell. I'm not a massive Austin Hooper fan, but he's a good sort of top-tier tight end. So there is a chance. It's funny, isn't it, that the sort of Mayfield, Darnold, Allen are all bunched together in mine, just even though they came from the same draft. They're all sort of on that same path. Obviously, Lamar's not in this group, or might be at 15. But they're all sort of on that same level, and they're all moving in the right direction. The next, obviously, I've got Sam Darnold, who I am a big fan of. I think he will become a top quarterback in the league. I don't think we're ever going to see a non-athletic quarterback as a top 5 quarterback anymore. I think your Kylers, your Russell Wilson, your Lamar Jackson, even Aaron Rodgers to a certain extent is a little bit athletic. And I'm not saying that Sam Darnold's not athletic, but I don't think that sort of pocket presence, great in the pocket, throw the ball, I just don't think they'll ever be top 5 quarterbacks anymore. I just don't think there's a place for him in the NFL. He's obviously going to play in the NFL for a long time, but they'll never be perceived as the best quarterbacks around like they were sort of 10, 15 years ago. But again, I do think Darnold can, or I hope that he moves in the right direction this year with the Jets. They're not a great team at the minute. I mean, his receivers, they drafted Denzel Mims, but they've not got great receivers. They've not got a great all. Le'Veon Bell's then sort of got going in New York. So he's not got a lot around him, but last year he showed that he can put the team on his back and win games for them. And I think he will do that next year, but he needs some help around him if he really wants to progress and sort of win that division.
I'd really like to see Darnold get some help. As much as he's a Jets player or not, maybe I want him to get some help somewhere outside of the AFC East. But he's very close to... If he had as good a system as Josh Allen has in Buffalo, we would probably be talking about him as the top QB in the AFC East at the minute. But he's not had the help, and I think he's shown flashes, but he can't sort of become that star in the system he's in at the minute.
I think he just needs the right coach. I don't think Gase is the right man for the Jets. I think another year, and I think he's probably gone. And then it just depends if they drop on and get the sort of next good coach, or if they stumble through. I hope they don't stumble through his career and not ever find a good coach and a good team to put around him, because I think he is a good quarterback, and that is or does seem like the toughest thing to find in the NFL.
Yeah, I think Darnold is like you sort of saw like potentially how good he can be because of how bad the Jets were last year when he didn't play, and then when he did play, like they finished the season quite strong, didn't they? They were like started the year with like 1 win. I'm sure like they ended the year like with like 5 or 6 wins on the bounce or something like that. Yeah. So that just sort of showed like what he actually means to that team, really.
No, he is a good player, definitely. And then 16, I've got Josh Allen, who I've always been a big fan of. Josh Allen, do like a quarterback with a big arm, and he's definitely got that. He's still got a lot of things he needs to tidy up, but raw ability, he has got the potential to be your sort of top 10, top 5 quarterback. I do believe that. Just depends. Obviously, McDermott's there, obviously the coach. They're obviously getting they signed Diggs this year. They're getting weapons around him. If he can sort of start to slowly tidy up things, staff mistakes that he makes, then I do think again he's on the right path. I do fancy the Bills this year to sort of take the East. I think it is finally the year. I don't know around. I think the Patriots will be up there. I think it'll be a tough division this year, but I think they'll take the East and go into the playoffs again, and they'll have another shot in the playoffs.
The comparison I'd make for Josh Allen, and not in sort of the same sense, because I'm going to say Russell Wilson, but I think Russell Wilson's always going to be better.
Yeah.
But in the sense of when Russell Wilson went to Seattle, they had obviously the Legion of Boom, and it was a strong defense and Russell Wilson could sort of hone his craft and sort of develop really well for a couple seasons, whilst everything else plays the parts for him, and then in a few years they'll be able to sort of shift off pieces and get sort of less expensive pieces, and he'll probably be able to win games on his own.
Yeah, which he has done.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a little bit underrated, really, earlier in his career. Like everyone obviously saw that raw ability, but because Seattle was that sort of team, it never lended itself to Russell Wilson being this electrifying QB, because they were playing in sort of such like hard-fought games. and it was all about the D. Which took a little bit of the shine off him, but yeah, no, I do take the comparison. Yeah.
I mean, if that's 20-16 on that side, let's see where Chris has gone on his side.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a couple of similar ones there. We've got like Darnold and Mayfield in like a very like similar like sort of ranking. So I'll not really speak about them too much when I come to it. But 20, I've got Kirk Cousins. He's a difficult one, Kirk Cousins, because he shows flashes of brilliance, but then he also goes missing for a couple of games. Like last year, he had a game where I don't think he targeted like Stephon Diggs like all game, and then the next game he comes back, targets him for like 10 targets, and he gets about 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So like you don't really know what he's going to do. I think he's been fortunate in Minnesota that he's had really good receivers around him, and like he's had Dalvin Cook this past year, sort of that he could. They really heavily relied on the run game at the start of the year, and I think that showed you a little bit that potentially Zimmer didn't trust Cousins enough to throw the ball 30, 40 times a game. They were leaning heavily on the run, but that might just be because Dalvin Cook is a very good running back, and that's the system that works for them. I don't think he's worth the contract he got, but that was just sort of the timing. So I think it was a perfect time for him. But I think that's why 20 is like sort of like a perfect sort of spot for him, because he's not like a dead flashy QB, but at the same time he doesn't make that many mistakes. So for me he's a good level starting quarterback. He's not that top tier quarterback though for me.
I think the only reason they might have kept hold of him and give him the number that they did was that if you think that the Bears in the same division were looking in the quarterback market, I think Kirk Cousins could have done a lot in Chicago, and they might have wanted to sort of keep him there knowing what he can do, and then in 2 years they might look for a younger, fresher face.
Yeah, I don't think he's the answer like for Minnesota like long term. I think he, like you say, might be there a couple more years and then they potentially move on from him. I don't see him being there for like the next 7 to 10 years. I think they will eventually move on from him over the next few years.
Yeah, solid QB though. He's
doing
his work.
And then 19, Big Ben. To be honest with you, he would probably be a lot higher up on my list if he played more like last year. Like I think he only played like 1 or 2 games last year. I had a feeling that like he always seems to get injured. So I had a little look as to how many times he played all 16 games. And in the last 10 years, he's only played all 16 games 3 years. So from 2010 up until now, he's only played all 16 games 3 times. Like he's missed either a game or 2 or 3, and obviously last year he missed the majority of the season. And I just wonder with him whether it's getting to that point where his body just can't really take it anymore, especially the type of style he plays, where he'll stand in the pocket and just get hit and then take a hit and shrug it off. I just feel it's potentially caught up to him a little bit. And it'd be interesting to see what happens this year, whether he does play a full year or not. Because I thought if they'd have had the first round pick this year, they'd have probably been in the quarterback market. But obviously they used that on Fitzpatrick, which turned out brilliantly for him. But I think you could see the Steelers looking at the quarterback market either like in this upcoming draft or the next. But he's been phenomenal for years, and he's worked with what he had around him, and he's had the Steelers in contention pretty much every year since he's been there. I just feel it's potentially just coming to a bit of an end with him. Like that whole quarterback class, it looks like it's coming to an end. Like Eli's obviously already gone. Rivers has left the Chargers, and it looks like Ben could have maybe like 1 or 2 years left in him, and that potentially could be it.
Yeah, I'm probably about in the same position as you are on Roethlisberger now. I think if you'd have done this, 2 years ago, then I'd have had him well higher. But he's dropped off a bit. I think last year was sort of the sign that he is getting old, and the fact that he just threw a football and he blew his arm out.
That's what I mean. Like I've seen like some videos of him throwing it like this, like over the past like month or so, and it does look good. But obviously that's an off season, like
big off season.
Big off season, yeah. Like you don't know, like obviously once it comes to actual game time, it's different, isn't it? 18, I've got Derek Carr. Obviously, Luke spoke about him last week. Luke's a little bit lower on him than I am. I've got him a little bit too high, but when I just looked at the quarterbacks who I've got in front of him, I just thought couldn't put him any higher, and I looked at the ones behind him. I thought I'd potentially trust Derek Carr a little bit more to run like an offense for me and be the quarterback for my team for either that game or that season. Like he's a bit like Cousins, really. He's not dead flashy. He's a little bit conservative at times. I'd like to see him do that a little. I'd like to see him push it down the field a little bit more. I think Gruden, like we said last week, he's not really married to him, and I think the whole Mariota move is to sort of put a bit of a rod up his arse, give him that kick that he needs. But again, like we said with Cousins, we don't really see Cousins potentially being the long-term answer for the Vikings. I don't see Carr as potentially the long-term answer for the Raiders either. I think he could be gone in the next year or so. I think, like the past 2 years, the Raiders have had a chance probably to take a quarterback and haven't. So that potentially tells you something that Gruden believes in a little bit, but I don't think he's completely married to him. And then 17 and 16, we've spoke about Mayfield and Darnold already. Very similar views to Luke. I think both of them potentially could become like top tier quarterbacks. Like Mayfield's got everything around him to succeed. It's just whether he can put it all in place and click. And like Darnold, he's looked like he sort of is that franchise now. And when he doesn't play for him, they look woeful. When he does play for him, they do look like a team that can scare some teams. So it's whether they can get the pieces around Darnold. I think if Darnold had the pieces around him that Mayfield had, Darnold would potentially be a top 10 quarterback. He's just obviously not got those weapons around him. So you'd like to see the Jets sort of invest a little bit more around those skill positions for him.
I think I agree. That seems like the right sort of level for the 16s to 20. But no, I wouldn't really change too much. Obviously, we're creeping close to the top, and that's probably where it's going to get more argumentative on who's in what place.
I thought you'd have had Sam Darnold like number 3, Ben, because the Jets are killing that division.
Jets are going 15-1.
He's also got the Browns going to the AFC Championship, so I thought he'd have had Mayfield 1, Darnold 2.
2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Two and number 3.
2 are just because he's a rookie, maybe a year later.
Yeah, that's what I've not seen him play in the NFL, so I popped him at number 3. But
yeah.
Luke.
So 15, I've got Dak Prescott, leader of them boys. I like Dak. I think he's a good player. I'm a lot higher on him than I think Ben is. I don't think there's a question that Dak is the starter and will be the starter for the next however many years.
Yeah, Ben's got Andy Dalton as his number 4, just behind Tua.
Yeah, I think he must have. But no, I like Dak. I think he's a good player. I think he does get a bit of flack, really. He makes stupid mistakes, but so do a lot of QBs. And there's games where he goes missing, but again, so do a lot of QBs. I think when it's all said and done, I think the Cowboys will pay him. I think they'd be daft not to, really. I don't think players of Dak's ability don't come around often, especially not in the 4th round where they selected him. His ability to run, and like Chris has mentioned it a few times, inside the 5-10 yard line, like if you've locked up them receivers and he's had a little bit of time, he's looking at that line and he's going to go for it. I can't remember the number of touchdowns he scored in the NFL rushing, but I'm pretty sure it's 25 plus. I may be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But it is a lot. But yeah, I do like that. I think he's a good player and he's got some serious weapons around him going into next year. I think it'd be nice to see, well, not from Chris's point of view, but it'd be nice to see Zeke turn up a little bit next year. He's sort of had a couple of down years. Don't think he's a top running back, but if he gets going next year with the receivers he's got, and obviously that line's still pretty dominant, well, like I've said in the past, I think they're going to be a serious contender in the NFC.
This is a very dangerous thing to say, and it could come back to bite me on the arse, but I think Zeke is going to absolutely fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got
like the end of Zeke.
Maybe not the end of him, but I think his best years are already behind him. I don't think he'll have,
because he only had like 1.5.
I know. I just think like
he was so good that rookie year though.
I know, but the thing is though, it's always been like his line. I mean, he is explosive and stuff, but I think he gets a lot more credit than he should do. I think I don't think he's a top 5 running back. Put it that way. Like,
Where was this in bold predictions?
We're doing 2040. We're doing top 40 QBs, not top 10 running backs. That's for a few weeks.
Just saying. I just thought I'd put
Not
that
giving people tasters.
I know, yeah.
So yeah. Next up, I've got Cousins. Obviously, a little bit higher than Chris. I like Kirk Cousins. I think he's a good QB. Again, at times he makes daft mistakes, and he's not going to sort of always put your team on the back. But at the end of the day, he has won in big games. I know that was a big thing about him not winning in prime time and all that. But he beat the Saints in the Superdome last year, and he made some pretty clutch plays. I do think he gets a little bit of unfair criticism. It's just probably just because in these big games where he's expected to show up, he's not quite showed up. But I do think he's a good QB, and he has got some good players around him. Obviously, they've lost Diggs, but it always was going to happen with Thielen and Diggs. You can never pay 2 top receivers, and obviously they've gone with Thielen. And maybe it might help them, because I felt like every other week Diggs was moaning about his targets and his receptions and all the rest of it. And it just becomes a bit of annoyance for teams. But no, I do like him. I think they've got a solid team, and I do definitely think put enough pieces around Kirk Cousins, I do think he can win you a Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong, he's not going to win it on his own, but the right sort of team around him, I think he can do it. Next up, I've got Jared Goff, obviously Rams fan. I think this is a fair position for him. I've always said he was around this in between 10 and 15 mark. I think it's pretty fair. He does get a lot of flack, but then I feel like sometimes he gets a lot of love from people. You either sort of love him or hate him, I think. I don't think there's a sort of middle ground with him.
There's definitely a middle ground with him.
Oh, hey, lad, okay.
I don't love him, don't hate him. And like you said, I think he gets a lot of flack, and I think one of the reasons he gets a lot of flack is because people say, "Oh, he's only good because of his because of his head coach McVay." I don't think that's fair. I think you could put I think you could put other quarterbacks in that, and they wouldn't do as well as Goff has done.
People who question Jared Goff and people who disagree with my decision to have him there and think he should be lower, go and watch the highlights of the Rams versus the Chiefs, 54-51, and the Rams-Vikings Thursday Night Football, and trust me, Jared Goff has the potential to be a top quarterback, and he shows it on a lot of occasions.
Have you been reading my notes? Have you been reading my notes?
He doesn't show it enough, though, and that's his problem. And again, we've talked about it in the past with different quarterbacks. We talked about it with Mitch. Unfortunately, players are compared to the players they're drafted with. For Mitch, it's really unfair, and Mitch will always have that hanging over him. And it's the same with Goff, because I do think Wentz was and is and always will be the better quarterback. He's got more physical attributes. I think he's got a better arm. I think just overall, I think Wentz is a better quarterback. Wentz has the question marks from his injuries, but unfortunately for Goff, he was taken one spot ahead of him, and that always seems to be there and talked about. And also Dak as well being a 4th rounder in that draft. They're always compared between the three of them. But no, like I said, I do like Goff. I think he's a good player. And I mean, the Rams were having okay type of game against the Patriots, and the Rams, Jared Goff's a Super Bowl winner. Like, they didn't even have to play great that game. They just had to play okay, and they probably beat the Patriots that day. I do definitely think the Rams can win with it. Like you said, like Chris mentioned, the whole Sean McVay thing, a lot of OCs give quarterbacks bread and butter throws where they just, Shanahan does it all the time because they're good OCs and they have the ability to get people wide open over the field. I do think that is a little bit unfair on Goff.
Well, we'll put it like a bit simpler is that Goff was one dropped catch away from a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah,
that's it.
And there'd be a lot less hate now if it was Jared Goff, Super Bowl winner.
Yeah,
but because it's Jared Goff played shit in the Super Bowl, even though he did make some good throws, but because he did, and as well, people forget about the Saints game as well. He's gone into the Super Bowl. We were at the Superdome. We were down big, and he made some clutch plays in that game. But again, the pass interference takes everything away from that game. That's all that's remembered. Then at 12, I've got Big Ben. Obviously, I'm a little bit higher on Big Ben than you two. I still think he's got a chance. I do think injuries are a problem, and I do think he will. There is more potential for him to get injured. He's not a sort of gym guy. He's not going to be in the gym eating right. His body's not in great shape to be an NFL quarterback. Not like someone like Cam Newton. And I do think that's always been a bit of a hindrance. But at the same time, it's worked for him over the last few years, over the last sort of 10 years. And I do think Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots are not around. Big Ben's probably got maybe one, maybe two other rings, because the amount of times they seem to meet in the AFC Championship with the Patriots. Like I say, I do think this year is a pivotal year. The Steelers are obviously going to start looking at replacing him. He's getting on in age. He's been in the league, I think, this will be his 17th or 18th year, so it is a long time to be playing. But I still think there is a chance for him this year. I think they've got a good team. Defense is unbelievable, and they've got some good young players, I know, that I think can help him out. And then number 11, I've got Rivers. I like the move that he made this off season. It sort of got to that point I nearly said San Diego again. I don't know what's wrong with me. In LA, where it just didn't seem right. I think they obviously had a great run, never quite made it to the Super Bowl. But I think for the Chargers, for Rivers, it was the right thing to do to sort of break it off, let him have another few shots at the Super Bowl with the Colts. And I think they've got a good team. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they're one of the best teams in the AFC, but if Rivers has another sort of good year, good MVP caliber year, which he did have a couple of years ago, that people have soon forgotten, then I think the Colts can be a decent side next year.
Yeah, I like the move. He's going behind a great O-line. He's not going to get hit. He's not going to be hurried. I think if they're going to miss Eric Ebron at tight end, though. But yeah, if T.Y. Hilton could stay healthy, then it could be a good offense for them.
Yeah, and they got Pittman and Jonathan Taylor, two good rookies that a lot of people are excited to see as well, which can only help him.
And there we go. We're going to go to Chris's side. Talk us through.
Yeah, so I've got Murray at 15. Got him a little bit higher than Luke has. Maybe it's a little bit more of a projection, but I think if you just look at last year, I think he probably outperformed the quarterbacks that are below him. So I think potentially a rightfully deserved place in there. I mean, he's potentially the perfect blend of quarterback that you want in today's sort of game. He can throw the ball, he can run with the ball, he's smart, he's a good decision maker. And like we said with Hopkins, he's only potentially going to get better. That team's going to get better, and he makes you defend the whole field. So he's one that potentially next year you'd be looking at potentially a top 10 quarterback. And like Luke said, with the baseball sort of background, it does seem that like the past three highly touted quarterbacks have that baseball sort of background. So that potentially is something to look at for the future. 14, Rivers, a little bit lower down than Luke, but agree with everything that you sort of said and that you said, Ben, about him having like a really good offensive line now. I still think he's got a little bit left in the tank. I don't think we've seen the last good years out of Rivers. I think he potentially has got another one or two in him, and he's potentially got a decent shot at like playoffs and a Super Bowl with the Colts. I think with that line there, I think that's what he's got the best offensive line he's ever had. He just potentially needs another receiver around him, and that could be a dangerous offense with Rivers there. Number 13, probably the big one on this part of the list, Tom Brady. People will probably say he's a little bit too low down, and people will probably say he's still a top 10 quarterback. For me, he's not anymore. I think last year showed the start of the decline of Brady. Like, he's still one of the smartest quarterbacks in the game, but what his brain's telling him and what his arm can do, I think, are two different things now. And he has become a little bit of a check down quarterback. He's not willing to push that ball down the field as much as he once would. And potentially that's because of his arm he knows that his arm can't do it. There's a reason why the Patriots let him walk. Like, they obviously felt it was time, and I don't think you let a top 10 quarterback walk out your organisation. They say, it's because he potentially wanted too much money. But for all those other years, he was getting a similar type of deal, and I think they obviously didn't value him as to that. And if he's a top 10 quarterback, you value your top 10 quarterback to pay a top 10 quarterback, and obviously Bill Belichick didn't, and obviously he's one of the smartest minds in the game. For me, he's not that top 10 quarterback anymore, and I'm sure that you two will have a different opinion than that. but for me, I've spoken about it the past couple of weeks, and like he's not the answer in Tampa for me.
My opinion is that he's still that top 10 quarterback. I think last year is sort of a sign that yes, he's aging and he's gonna. I mean, who knows? He could fall off a cliff next year, and Chris, you could be completely right. But I think he's still one of the most efficient people, and that is what the system in New England was designed to do. He wasn't always designed to chuck it 30, 40 yards down the field for a touchdown. You know, it's designed for 11 play drives, 12 play drives, and then we'll cap it off with a touchdown.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that that's what the system was about. I just think when it came to the point where he did need to do that sometimes, he couldn't do it. Like the game against the Titans, like he just couldn't do it. And I think it's catching up with him. And like I don't know how it's going to work this year, because Bruce Arians historically hasn't been that sort of methodical sort of drive. His offenses have been big plays, and that's what sort of Jameis was perfect for last year. So I don't really know how he's going to have to change his whole offense for Brady. I don't know if it's going to work out personally.
I think something with Brady that's possibly very not underrated, but maybe forgotten about, is just like his clutch factor. All right, we talk about the Tennessee Titan game. Yeah, he threw a pick six and they lost the game, but the amount of times in a 2-minute drill he just drives them down the field, and I don't think that sort of experience you ever lose, and I think that's something that he'll always be able to do and always be able to manage. I think he's such a smart quarterback. He's been in the league for so long under some very good OCs. Something that potentially could happen next year is that we might find that the Tampa Bay offense isn't strictly Bruce Arians, Byron Leftwich's offense. I feel like Brady will get a lot of say in that offense and will be able to implement things that he likes as well. And you might find that it's a bit of like a mashup of the two, where there's still a bit of Bruce Arians like bombing it downfield, but also Brady's ability to sort of clever little trick plays, you know, like the sort of screen type stuff they do, the check down stuff. But I suppose at the same time, you need those players, and he always had Edelman, he always had Gronk. So we'll just have to see what happens. Obviously, what's going on in the world at the minute may hinder what could be a very good offense next year.
I think Brady is by far and will be by far the greatest pre-snap quarterback there is. The way he can run an offense is amazing. I think last year he did have that. You could have argued, especially last year, and they will develop, but possibly the worst wide receiver core in the NFL last year.
I don't know. The Eagles have given him a good run for the money.
I think the Eagles definitely had that worst receiver core.
Well, and I think it will probably help that he's moved to a greater receiver core. But yeah, I can see he's not going to be bombing it down the field. I think he might drop out of that top 10 for me after next year. We'll see. But I think for now, in my personal opinion, he's still up there.
Well,
Yeah,
you both
obviously it's Chris, it's your list though, so I can't.
Yeah. I mean, you're both wrong, but like, that's all right. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Number 12, got Jared Goff. I mean, Luke spoke about him at length, and he's probably the best person to talk about him being a Rams fan. But obviously, like, he's a little bit biased. So I can give you like the honest answers about Jared Goff, and I agree with pretty much everything that Luke said. Like a couple of things that I had wrote down about him was Jared Goff against the Chiefs, Jared Goff against the Saints in the NFC Championship game. Like Jared Goff at the end of that NFC Championship game, I just remember he sort of rolled right, threw it to his right, and it was such a good throw, and it kept the drive alive, and he basically won them the game. which got them into the Super Bowl. And everyone always remembers like the pass interference, but people don't remember like about the quarter before, Jared Goff was running. He was running into the end zone basically. He pretty much got the yardage, and he was like scragged back by his helmet or something, and it wasn't called. Yeah. And people just remember it for that pass interference when really Jared Goff actually played really well in that game, and it was probably at that point it was the biggest game of his career, and he actually showed up at the end of the game. So he answered quite a lot of my questions at that point. And then he is just overshadowed, I think, by the fact that Wentz was in the draft and Dak was in the draft, but then also that he's got McVay on as his coach. But like I said before, I think you could put a lot of other quarterbacks in there who wouldn't perform as well as Jared Goff has done. He is smart, and McVay can serve up all these plays for him on a silver platter, but at the end of the day, he's got to execute it, and he does do that, and he's a good quarterback for it. And I think this is the sort of level that he sort of goes at and probably stays at. Whether he cracks the top 10 in the next few years or not, I don't know. I think you'll probably see other quarterbacks who are a little bit behind him. He'll start to come up, like Kyler Murray, like Drew Lock, like those type of players, like potentially Tua Ben. I had to get that one in there for you. They could leapfrog him, and this sort of range between 10 and 15 is potentially where he sits, which is no means a bad position to sit for your career as one of the 10.
Yeah, I always think that'll be Goff's range. It'll always be that Goff range where he is now. We're obviously 12 and 13. I think he definitely will always be in that bracket. Because I know he's just quite good enough to be a top 10. He doesn't have the sort of the attributes Kyler Murray has, and I don't think he has the arm that Josh Allen has. But he has got a lot of good things. He does have a good arm. He is very underrated in the pocket. That is something that a lot of people take for granted with Jared Goff. He is very good in the pocket.
Well, that's the thing. You can win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. You don't need to have a top 5 quarterback to win a Super Bowl. It helps, but you don't need it. The Rams are just fine with Jared Goff. Yeah, he's probably getting paid a little bit too much, but that was the quarterback market at the time. And in 3 years' time, the money that Jared Goff's on will probably not be very high for a quarterback. It's just that quarterback market gets reset every single time someone.
That's what happens. That's the way.
That doesn't bother me at all. And then number 11, got Josh Allen. Luke's already spoke about him a bit. I'm the same as Luke. I really like Josh Allen. I think I really like big arm quarterbacks, and like I said before, I really like quarterbacks that can do stuff with the feet as well. And he's got both. I think he's a quarterback on the rise. I think in the first year there, he sort of got a bit of flack for the mistakes he made, and he probably didn't have the best system around him. But I think Buffalo sort of found what works for them now. And with him getting Diggs as well, he could get him to that point where he's consistent, and he has that consistent number 1 receiver on the field. You don't really want to go in thinking that John Brown's your number 1 receiver, and that's what he had last year. But he's now got a bona fide number 1 receiver, one of the best route runners in the league. I don't think he is the best route runner that people keep saying. I think he's one of the best. I think a guy who I'll talk about later on is probably the best route runner in the league. But I think he's a bit of an underrated runner as well. I think last year he showed what he could do, and people don't really think that he's that good of a runner because he doesn't break off and he's not breaking people's ankles. But because he's got such a big arm, he makes you defend that deep ball, which then potentially opens up for him to take off and run. And I think he's a quarterback who over the next couple of years could easily break the top 10. And I think Buffalo, if they build around Josh Allen and they keep that defense somewhat intact, I think could be players over the next couple of years, and you could see them making deep playoff runs as well.
Yeah, I'll have to admit, I made the comparison earlier to Russell Wilson, but I'm still a skeptic on Josh Allen. I suppose that's more of him being in my division than it is.
That's the same with me and Dak, though. That's the same with me and Dak, Ben. I refuse to admit that Dak Prescott is a good quarterback. I mean,
he's not in he's in your top 10, mate.
He might not be in my top 40.
Wow! Imagine.
But I think I finally came to. I had to put him where I thought was fair. And if I was going off my heart, then he wouldn't be a top 10 quarterback. But I had to just sort of.
He's 41.
Yeah, so he's 41. Yeah.
Find out for next week if Dak Prescott's 41 or top 10.
Yeah, tease them with it.
So we've got 10 left on either side. Looking interesting. I mean, you can probably sort of whittle down to who's in there, but it's the ordering. I think obviously I've seen your ordering, but I think that it'll shake up a few people. There's something
Dak or no Dak on Chris's list. Hashtag no, Dak or no Dak.
Let's put it this way: if Cam Newton would have already signed for the Patriots when we started this, Dak Prescott would be a top 10 quarterback. So
Cam Newton would be. I'd have been talking about Cam Newton this week.
I'd have had Cam Newton at probably number 10.
He'd have been discussed, I think, this week for me.
We've decided that we're all going to give some players that we think are underrated. Me and Luke got called homers, so we'll see who Chris has got.
Well, you both are. Well, my first underrated player is Keenan Allen. No, by no means does that mean that he doesn't get like the love that he should, but I don't think he gets enough respect. I think when people think of the top receivers, I don't think anyone ever mentions Keenan Allen in the top 5. But for me, I think he would potentially sneak into my top 5. And like I said before about Stephon Diggs, people say he's probably the best route runner in the league. For me, it's Keenan Allen. That you've only got to watch a couple of highlights of him to see how good of a route runner he is. He is an absolute, like, off that line of scrimmage, that first little shimmy shake that he's got, he can send cornerbacks like on their arse.
He does it to the best cornerbacks as well, which is mad.
Exactly. Like he doesn't just do it against these like third string cornerbacks. He's doing it against number 1 cornerbacks. He's doing it
against the Eagles.
No, not just against the Eagles. No, to be fair, he's never really torched us because we don't play him that much. But he's doing it consistently against the best corners in the league, and people know that he's the number 1. He was the number 1 target for Rivers, and in clutch moments, Rivers would go to him, and he'd still be able to find himself getting open. And it's not like he's just got that. He's got good hands as well. Like, you don't really see him drop that many balls. He's not got elite speed, but when he needs to turn it on, he can do. And like yards after catch as well, he can do that as well. Like there's that quite famous one against the Cowboys, which I love seeing, where he catches that ball. Yeah, and he's basically running around, and the Cowboys are all falling over. I mean, it's always nice for me to watch that one. I think one of the reasons why I probably know him a little bit and recognise his game a little bit is because obviously, Jack, a fellow Bandit, like, is a Chargers fan, and obviously watched quite a few games with him, and he's always pointing out how good Keenan Allen is. And I just think it's about time we showed a little bit of love to probably one of the best receivers in the game who potentially doesn't get as much love as he should do.
So I'm probably the right person to sort of say that to, because I suppose if I looked at wide receivers, Keenan Allen wouldn't be one of the names that popped into my head. And you're right, every point that you make, he should be. And I think I'll probably try and pay more attention to Keenan Allen and some of his plays next year, because I do agree with that. You're going to have to, Ben,
because you're going to be comparing Herbert and Tua all year.
I think one of the reasons why people don't think about him is because he doesn't have that big flashy play, like where he gets the ball and runs. That is basically the Dallas one is the only one he's sort of done where he's like that, or that amazing spectacular catch. But consistently, he's one of the top 10 in receiving yards each year. But it's just his route running ability for me. It'd be interesting to see what he does this year without that connection with Rivers, because he's only ever known Rivers. That's the only quarterback he's ever played with. Like, Rivers doesn't miss games, so it's not like, a quarterback's been in there for a game or two. So it'd be interesting to see what he does this year, whether it be with Tyrod or whether it be with Herbert.
Tyrod actually improved his game,
I'm a big fan of Keenan Allen, to be fair. Same as Chris, obviously, watch probably more Chargers than most people because of Jack. But yeah, he is one of the best receivers in the league, and like I said, very underrated.
Okay, yeah. Luke, do you want to give us your first one?
Yeah, so my first pick is my homer pick. I find it a little bit difficult to think of players just because they're underrated. So, like that is what makes it hard. Whereas because I'm a Rams fan, I know who the underrated guys are because I watch them week in, week out. And mine would be Robert Woods. He was signed from Buffalo on a pretty mediocre deal. A lot of people questioned it and sort of scoffed at it and didn't think he was going to be anything. He was just going to be sort of average receiver. He never really did much at Buffalo, but for a long time, Buffalo was such a poor team offensively. They didn't have a good quarterback. They didn't have a good OC. They just had nothing going for him. But since he got to LA, he's just been phenomenal. He's had over 3,000 yards over the 3 years in LA, and even that's playing with Sammy Watkins, that's playing with Brandon Cooks, that's playing with Cooper Kupp, who were all top receivers. Again, none of them are sort of top 5 receivers, but they're all good receivers who warrant targets and warrant receptions as well. And obviously Gurley for a couple of years was like offensive player of the year and MVP candidate type years, running the ball so well, and to still put up 3,000 yards is a good showing. He just makes so many, obviously again because I see it week in, week out, he makes so many sort of clutch catches, big sort of third downs. He's not quite third and cut, but he does make
That's
a lot of
the worst.
It's the best, lad. Third and cut. Third down, Mr. Cooper Cup. But anyway, we're not on about it. But no, he does. He makes a lot of clutch plays for Jared Goff. And he is one of Jared Goff's favourite targets. There's a reason he's stuck around. Obviously, Brandon Cooks has gone. Obviously, Sammy Watkins didn't stay around long. He's just been so consistent for us over the 3 years, and big parts as to why we've had playoff runs and we've had the Super Bowl run. Yeah, and as well, he's on such a small deal when you look at it. Unfortunately, I think he may leave in the next couple of years. He's a free agent, I think, next summer or next off season, and I do think it'll be the end of Robert Woods with the Rams, just because he'll want to get paid more than what we can probably afford. Because unfortunately, like we've just mentioned, we've got the Jared Goff contract, we've got the Aaron Donald contract. Hopefully, we'll have a Cooper Kupp contract. But yeah, he's one of. I think he is. Again, I don't think he's quite what Chris was saying about Keenan Allen, where he's a top 5 wide receiver. But I do think he's sort of similar to Goff, really, in that 10 to 15 range. But he doesn't get that love. It's always like you always seem to see him like top 25, and I think he is much better than that.
Yeah. I'll take over, but obviously Chris said that I'd stole one of his picks for this week, and I'm being a homer myself. I've gone for Devontae Parker, someone who, like you say, he's another receiver who doesn't get sort of the top 10 love. I'm not too sure whether he is a top 10. That might come over time. I do like him, and I think that no one took notice of him until he started. He was arguing with Michael Thomas over Twitter in the recent months. Don't think anyone really took notice until last year. But I wanted to point out sort of like his last 3 seasons, because his first 2 or 3 seasons he was injured a lot, and that's when Tannehill was about. So obviously he never built any sort of chemistry with Tannehill. 2017 season, Jay Cutler comes in. Devontae Parker's healthy for most of it. And this is where Cutler sort of sees the potential in Parker. And he gets 96 targets, which is his second most in his career. And he actually goes for 670 yards, which obviously isn't that much, but he didn't play the full season. But 96 targets to 57 receptions. And then the next year he goes back to Tannehill, and he only gets 47 targets and 24 receptions. Obviously, I think that chemistry wasn't built, and you can't blame Tannehill for injuries on either side. And then I think Fitzpatrick again went back up. It went back up to his most targets, 128 to 72 receptions. it's his first 1,000-yard season, 9 touchdowns. I think he really, really stepped up. And I think for when Tua starts, he's going to be this great target. You've got to think he's really tall and he can jump over people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, obviously I was going to sort of talk about him, but one of it was because I had him in my fantasy last year. And like he sort of just like came out of nowhere. I think one of the reasons why he potentially is a little bit underrated is because he was a first round receiver, and like you said, he hadn't really done it for those first like 4 years. Obviously, last year is the first year where he has done it. Now it's whether he can consistently do it, whether he can do it year on year. You get receivers that have like 1 year, a flash 1 year, and then nothing. Like Nelson Aguilar had it a couple of years ago at the Eagles, where he had a really good year, and then the next year he then goes back to absolute like nothing. It's as if he doesn't exist. Now he's on the Raiders. So it's whether he can consistently do it. But like you said, he needs to build up that rapport with a quarterback. And he got paid, and I think that probably if he'd have hit free agency, he'd have been the number one receiver on the market. Like, because obviously Cooper got snapped up, didn't get a chance to hit free agency. So if he had done, he'd have been the number one receiver out there. I think there'd have been teams after him. Like I really like him. I think he's potential to be that top 10, top 15 receiver.
I'm a little bit like basically what you just described then, that I didn't know. Obviously, I knew who Devontae Parker was, and I just thought he was another first round sort of bust and never really took much notice of him. He's sort of perfect underrated player. Again, just through watching Red Zone, watching the NFL last year, obviously he had a great year, and that is where I first he showed up to me. But yeah, I mean, like Chris said, he's going to, and you both touched on it about the rapport with quarterbacks, and he's been unfortunate that he's never really developed that. And hopefully for the Dolphins, him and Tua can get it going together and forge quite a partnership.
Yeah, I think he has all the potential in the world to continue. You've got to think his best year was when the Dolphins were at the worst since he's been there. So
yeah.
But,
with a lot of like strange quarterback play, like Rosen in, Fitz in, like he was changing all year, and like the different quarterback was playing not every other week, but they were mixing it up, and it was a little bit unfortunate for him, and he still had a great year. So,
Chris, do you have another one?
Yeah, so I decided to be a homer in the end. And I've gone for the tight end, Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert. So tight end number 2 at the Eagles. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's a bit undervalued, is because he's in Zach Ertz's shadow. But I think if you put him on another team, he is the number 1 tight end. There's probably only maybe 10 tight ends in the league who are potentially better than him. So there's probably only like 10 teams that he wouldn't get onto. But I think the Eagles are going to have a hard decision over the next year or two when it comes up to the time of, do we extend Goddard and do we let Zach Ertz walk? Because I think potentially Dallas Goedert could be a better all-round tight end than Zach Ertz, because he's a much better blocker than him.
Yeah.
And he's not got that rapport with Wentz, because obviously Wentz and Ertz have had that chemistry since Wentz has been there. And he's been his number 1 target pretty much every year. But I think if Ertz isn't there, I think Goddard's his number 1 target every year, because he showed last year that he had some clutch plays at the end of the year, and when all the injuries decimated the Eagles' receiving core and they had to rely on the tight ends, like Goddard played in I think it was like 80% of the snaps, and he had some pretty like clutch third down, fourth down grabs, and I think his role in the team will just grow over this year and over the next year, and I think the Eagles will have a hard decision to make, and it'll be, do you go with your head or do you go with your heart and extend Ertz just because he's the number 1 tight end they've ever had. He leads like them in receptions and yards and touchdowns for tight end, and they won't want to lose that for the nostalgia value. But I think the smart decision over the next 2 years could be to let him go or to trade him while there's still value there, and promote Goddard to number one tight end. And I don't think you'd see much of a drop off in production. You need that you'd need another tight end to sort of then replace Goddard's like sort of role. But I think Goddard could easily step into Ertz's number one tight end role, and you wouldn't see much of a drop off in production. I think he's a bit underrated in that because he's behind Ertz.
Yeah.
This is where you two say you don't even know who Dallas Goddard is. But,
of course I know who he is. He was on my fantasy in his rookie year.
Definitely can't help having
he's a red zone target as well.
But yeah, another player who does slide under the radar. Luke?
So mine, I've gone with someone in the Rams division. Possibly maybe that's because I watch him twice a year as opposed to other teams never watching them sort of thing. He actually came out in the media this year and said he hates being called underrated. So if you're listening, Chandler Jones, I apologise because I think we're underrated.
He's definitely listening, 100%
Probably.
listening.
So I'm sorry, Chandler. Like, I'm
And if
going to
he
call you
isn't,
underrated.
then I'm going to send it to him.
Yeah, good. No, he's probably one of the best pass rushers in the league, and I just don't think he gets the love for being as good as he is, as dominant as he is. He's had, I think, 96 sacks since he started in 2012. He's had 8 seasons in the NFL. He's averaging 12 sacks a year. It's unbelievable numbers over such a long period of time. He's probably would have won Defensive Player of the Year a couple of times, if it not for people like Aaron Donald or Stephon Gilmore having a great year this year, JJ Watt in the past. I just think he always seems to slip under the radar. And it's probably because of the teams he's played on. He's played on a Patriots team where it's never defensive players that see. I know obviously Gilmore did last year, but it always feels like the defensive group gets the love, which is good and it should be, but singular players never seem to get picked out in New England. And he had some good years in New England and he was pivotal to their success, and then obviously went down to Arizona. And Arizona have never been good since he's been there. He's been there for 4 years and they've not had a good season. And unfortunately, that does happen, that players, even good players on poor teams, just don't seem to get any love. And I think that's possibly been a reason why he is underrated and is a little bit overshadowed. I think he's going to be one of the leading, one of the sack leaders in the NFL for the entire thing. I don't know if he's going to quite be number one. Probably never going to get up to that with his age, but he's easily going to go over 100 and well into 100 as well. And I just think he just doesn't seem to get out love, and maybe that's because you've got players like Aaron Donald, JJ Watt, Von Miller, who've just picked him to these Defensive Player of the Year awards over the last few years.
I think as well because he's not like a flashy sort of guy. Like you don't hear like too much. You never really hear from him.
No.
But I think and that might be because he came from the Patriots, and that's the sort of the Patriot way. But like one of the big things for me with him is that a lot of players leave the Patriots and go and get a big money deal, and then you don't really hear from him.
Yeah,
like, sort of fall off. Whereas he left the Patriots for big money, and since then he's probably just got better and better.
Yeah, I think he is a good pass rusher in Arizona, and like you said, they always fall off the radar because they're not on a championship team anymore. I think it's more that sense, but he definitely does enough damage back there.
Definitely annoyance for the Rams, I tell you that.
My second one is Philip Lindsay. I went for, obviously, running back for the Broncos, and I think as much as it was 2 seasons ago he had his breakout year, because obviously he really popped in his first year, but then I think with last year with the Broncos being sort of so middle ground and weird, no one noticed, but he was still popping off. He still had another 1,000-yard season, and to think that he went undrafted and the amount of teams that could have picked him up just ignored him, I think Philip Lindsay is the star running back. As much as Melvin Gordon's the bigger name, I think Philip Lindsay is the one who's the real running back in Denver.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, I think Lindsay's the number one back there. I think Melvin Gordon's there to take potentially like 8 to 12 carries a game. But do you want to be taking 8 to 12 carries a game off Philip Lindsay? I probably wouldn't. But I don't think Melvin Gordon's there to be taking 25 touches a game. I think he's for a very minimal role and just be able to give Philip Lindsay a bit of a rest, because when Lindsay's in, it can be a run and it can be a pass, because he is very good out the backfield as well. And mentioning that rookie season, he was in my fantasy team that rookie season. Did a lot for me that year.
Yeah, he was in mine both of the last 2 years. I think that's how I noticed him a bit more. Does fantastic sort of every game he plays. I think next year I'd watch for him to actually have an even more explosive year, considering they've done a lot for the wide receivers in Denver over the off-season, which might take a bit more focus away from the run game, and he might be able to, really pop off.
I think the Melvin Gordon addition. Obviously, Melvin Gordon's going to take snaps away from him. That's going to happen, but I do think it'll help him a little bit. Melvin Gordon come in and take a bit more of the tougher yards. Melvin Gordon's a big back, and I don't think Philip Lindsay is quite, in my opinion, a 3-down back. He reminds me a little bit of Austin Eckler. I don't think you can keep him out on the field for all three. I think he's a very good running back. He can catch the ball, obviously, but I don't think you'd want him taking a lot of punishment because he isn't the biggest back in the league. But I do definitely like him. He is a quality player.
If anyone wants to chuck anyone else into this mix, because it's obviously a wide open bag.
Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, think they're rated.
I'll tell you what I think underrated for a QB is Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I was gonna put him as one of my picks, but I thought, no, I'll leave that till next week.
I kind of thought that. I was thinking Matt Stafford, but then it was like, well, we're talking about quarterbacks anyway. But he's definitely underrated for me.
Yeah, I think I did this. I sort of wanted to get away from quarterback speech. Whilst we've talked, obviously, 30 quarterbacks so far, more or less, 29. We've still got 10 to go.
Another Chargers player would be Casey Hayward. I feel like he's top corner, and he just doesn't get the love that the other sort of top corners do.
But yeah, if you want to talk underrated quarterbacks, let's talk Chris Crook.
Well, that is the thing. I mean, people have seen us. We've got back to training the past couple of weeks. Obviously, Luke, you've not been there. No. You've not been. I mean, this arm here, it's coming out. It's coming out.
All hot. I can remember from your quarterback stint was you telling me to run a goal, then me realising you didn't have it in you, having to come back and just run like a two-yard little slam, catch it over.
To be fair, that was a designed play.
Chris, what's your stats in BAFA for quarterback? What is it? What?
Don't matter, lad. It really doesn't matter.
Is it 0 for 1 for a pick six? What is that rated?
It's 0, I think. But it's not about what you do in BAFA.
What about you in training?
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about BAFA. That's not happening.
Well, to be fair, that's all it's about now, because BAFA's not happening this year, so it really doesn't matter.
Also, Ben, you need to take that
fear in David Mooney's heart so that Mooney plays better. He's got all that.
Ben, when you start playing for the Renegades, does this become not just the Bandits show? You got to mix it up. You got to change the name.
Featuring one Renegade.
Yeah, Bandits and a couple of Renegades.
That's why I'm now officially QB2 of the Bandits.
Yeah, that's a bit harsh on your dad.
Well, I know, yeah. Retired. He's shielded.
He'll be back.
Yeah, thanks. We'll be back for the top 10
next week.
Yeah. almost there. But thanks for joining me. See you next time.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe for more content from us. And check out all of our social media links down in the description: Spotify, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Remember to watch all the other content on The Bandits Show. And see you next time.